Hello, everybody. This is Renaud and I am with Clive Greenwood. Welcome to episode 115 already of our podcast, China Manufacturing Decoded. So, as I mentioned, Clive Greenwood, an experienced compliance consultant who's done a lot of work in the China supply chain and who has joined a few past episodes of this podcast, is with me. And in episode 110, we covered the upcoming regulation from the European Union that is going to be called the Ecodesign Regulation, and is going to encourage, for lack of a better word, or maybe, let's say regulate and push people to make products that are sold in the EU in a more sustainable manner. So we talked about that in episode 110, and we said that we would follow up with what are the implications actually on buyers of products, on people who import products into the EU, and actually who make products in the EU and sell in the EU, right? Everybody's going to be affected in the same way. So we discussed a little bit before the podcast, and then there's going to be some impact on the way the products are designed, and there's going to be an impact on the suppliers, all the information you need from suppliers, and how production has to take place and be managed, and so on and so forth. And we're going to cover these two aspects. So first, let's look at the way products are designed. So Clive, hi, and thanks for joining us again.
So first of all, happy Thanksgiving to all our American viewers or listeners. Hope you have a good holiday.
4th of July.
Yeah.
Independence.
Still over there. And obviously, hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back with you, Renaud. Okay, why is it important? The regulation, the way that it is forming up at the moment, requires you as a manufacturer and the designer not only to think about the product life cycle, but the product after its life cycle. In other words, what happens when the product is no longer useful and how it's going to be handled.
Right. So for people to grasp this notion, whenever we talk about the environmental aspect and impact of a product, it's very important to look at it through the whole life cycle. So it's from extraction of raw materials and processing and distribution, all the transportation and warehousing and so on, the use of the product, obviously, but also the end of the life cycle is the disposal and hopefully recycling and so on and so forth, right? Or composting and maybe it biodegrades very fast and so on. So that's the full life cycle. And when a company designs a new product, what is the impact? Do they have some control over what happens to the product throughout its whole life cycle? And does it, do the designers actually control the impact of the product on the environment and its ability to be recycled, to go into a circular economy?
The answer is to that one is yes, they have to do. You can't decide that, well, that product is going to last for a year and I don't care what happens to it afterwards. If we think about it in the case of, we say that where quality is concerned, we always start at the design, so designing quality. Now, with this regulation, and don't forget, this is just at the moment a Council of Europe regulation, but it is expanding. And there is going to be a global harmonized standard for this. This you can be sure about. You have to also decide in the design phase, what is the impact on the environment when the product is no longer useful? And it has to be designed in. So you can't design a product which is, after it's been used, it throws away or it can't be recycled. And remember, the products have to be at least 80% recyclable. You can't say, well, after that, it just goes into a landfill. That is no longer going to be allowed. So the whole idea of throw away technologies, and it doesn't matter, and we're getting back to the old plastic bag syndrome. If you had this requirement, you would never have had disposable plastic bags.
Right. So it's not that I want to reassure the listeners. It doesn't mean that once this regulation comes into play, maybe in 1 year, maybe in 18 months, we're not really sure. And once once people really have to comply with it, which might be in, maybe 2 years from now, we don't really know.
2024. Yeah, the date's already been set.
Okay.
Yeah, they're already been set at the 21st of May, 2024.
Okay, that's helpful. So it doesn't mean that all the products that typically go to landfill at the end of their life will no longer be allowed, but it means that there's going to be some restrictions. If and the authorities will look into the products, and if there has been zero effort made, that's my understanding anyway. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but
if there's been zero effort made, that's it.
Right. Yeah, zero effort made. It's obviously possible to reduce the impact of the product on the environment. Maybe it's even possible to make it circular very easily. Okay, if you put that product on the market, you might run into issues. It's going to go against this regulation, right? And some other topics that we're going to mention a little bit later in the episode about, how you make it and what information you have about the different manufacturing steps involved and all that stuff. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But first, product design is so important. And product design involves, what does it involve? It involves picking the materials and the components, right? So is this regulation going to push companies to use more recycled content, maybe, of some of the materials?
It's going to look about the actual composite materials which are used in building the product, and how much percentage of those can be recycled.
Okay.
And the percentage which has been left, so let's say you can recycle 80%, 20%, then what is the impact of that 20%?
So this really comes when picking the materials, and also when building when deciding how to assemble or build the product, right? Because if at the end of life, it's nearly impossible to dismantle the product and to take the different materials apart for recycling, that's going to be a problem, right? So they're going to look at that. They're also going to look at the ability to repair the product or to do maintenance on the product. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's correct. Absolutely. If we cast our minds back maybe a year, 18 months, there was a lot of talk about something which was called the right to repair. Remember that?
Yes, there have been some regulations about that.
Well, that's right. So this now is coming into this regulation.
So people also should have access to spare parts and so on and so forth, right? Plus maybe some, there will have to be, at least when it makes sense, some instructions for repair staff on how to do. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. Now, if you think about the new mobile telephones, okay, the mobile telephones are being designed now not to be repaired. Yes, you can put a new screen on there, but if the battery goes, well, you throw the thing away and put a new one in, yeah? Putting a battery into an existing mobile phone is difficult because of the way that they're constructed. All of that's going to have to be looked at.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you look at what's happening, certainly with lithium ion and lithium hydroxide and things like this on the batteries now, okay, these are going to have a serious look at, because, okay, with lithium, you can recover 100% of lithium and recycle that. But the plastics that have gone into the molding of that have got to also be looked at, and also the chemicals which would be used to recover the lithium.
Yeah, sometimes recycling can be itself very dirty.
It's very, very dirty. That's right.
Yeah.
Now, and as a designer, you have to think to that level. This is what it means.
And one of the key aspects, because people might be wondering, okay, but like, where are the rules? Where are the guidelines? And really the point here, in my understanding, is that first, this regulation will come with some general principles, and you need to look at that. You need to look at that. Maybe you need to, maybe document a risk analysis, document pros and cons, the benefits and the risks of, or the costs of different alternatives, and pick the one that makes the most sense, but in a documented way. And if you do that, you will already be way ahead of maybe a lot of other importers, at least in the first few years, and until maybe there's more specific requirements specifically for your kind of product, because this regulation is going to impact basically all kinds of products, right? Except food and a few types of products, but most consumer goods and so on are going to be impacted right away. So you need to think about that, and then at one point they will look at your type of product. If you're in construction products or textile products, it will be much earlier. If you're doing consumer electronics, maybe as we were discussing last time, maybe it will be 1 or 2 years later, and so on and so forth. But the point is that if you do nothing, and if you don't try to document the different alternatives that you looked at, and why you picked that approach, and so on, you might get in trouble. Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, let me actually read you what the proposal actually says. There's a couple of key points on here. So the main objective of the regulation is to reduce the negative life cycle environmental impacts of products and improve the functionalities of products, the durability of products, and the life of products. They reflect the fact that products are available on the internal market, are generally accessible, advice, or the adverse effects of the environmental impact. The objectives regulation also contributes to the objectives of the EU industrial policy to boost the supply of and demand of sustainable goods, deliver on sustainable production, and ensure a level playing field for products sold on the market. Industrial harmonised requirements applicable across the board, effective means to comply with them, and proper enforcement. Couple of key words there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Durability, impact on the environment, and so on, right? So, for example,
enforcement.
Yes, and enforcement. Yeah. So, for example, durability, reliability. When a product is developed, there should be a test plan, and it should be tested, and
So accelerated.
Right.
Accelerated life testing is going to become the norm. You're going to have to supply the data. When we talk about the product passport, that data is going to have to be presented in the technical file.
Right. So right now they don't say things very specific, like the ALT and what kind of reliability test would be required, because again, it's going to impact so many different products. But if you're looking at, for example, electrical products, you might have to do highly accelerated lifetime testing at the early stages of prototyping, and then accelerated lifetime stages, and maybe a full life test is even better when you get to the end of product development. So something like that will have to be presented, and maybe in some cases they might, if it's very large batches, a product that for which reliability is super important, maybe also ongoing reliability testing on every production batch. They're not going to say, this is exactly what I want, this is the list of documents, right?
But what they are saying is that for the product to get a CE certificate, the requirements as laid down by this Act will be in that accreditation for the product at a product level.
Yes. So we're going to get more specific requirements soon. That's what you mean.
That's right. Yeah, the specific requirements as they come across. What it actually says in the things that the overriding effect of this standard will not be superseded by an individual product regulation. So you can't. So forget about any grandfather agreements or anything like this. The EU on this one is very clear. I'm just actually reading one of the paragraphs of player. When applying the eco-design approach to the very broad band of products and enabling it to set a wide range of target product requirements, this regulation seeks to address the most detrimental environmental impact of products. It therefore lays down the framework for setting eco-design requirements based on sustainability, circularity aspects listed in the Circular Economic Action Plan, such as product durability, reusability, upgradability, and efficiency, the recycling content of a product, the product's remanufacturing and high-quality recycling, and for reducing products' carbon and environmental footprints. That's it in a nutshell. Okay.
Yeah. There you have a list. Yes.
There you have the list.
Yeah. And all of this again is decided at the design stage. You have to design
at the design stage.
Yeah, design for reliability, design for recyclability, if that's realistic, design for all of these things.
Yes, all of them.
Right. Okay. So that's on the design stage, and that means if you are designing, and I'm talking to the audience here, and companies that sell products in the EU or are planning to, if you are designing new products or a new version of your product or something like that, your designers need to have some criteria. Hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Yes,
it has to go into the design risk assessment.
Yes, right. So some companies are going to call it risk assessment. Some companies are going to call it whatever, right? Like fulfilling the requirements or whatever. But really, it's about having the designers think about these things, and whenever they score some points and they say, oh yeah, we're going to do this, so this is going to be good. Document all of this, and if there's going to be an issue, they know that certain requirements, some of these points that you mentioned, are not going to be covered at all. They're going to have to do a risk assessment. Yeah, exactly. Okay, for this kind of product, what is the impact of not fulfilling the requirement? And
the impact, as far as I can see, the impact is that you will not get a product passport for it, and you will not get a CE certificate.
Yeah. So in this case, you might, when the time comes anyway, talk to your notified body, right? If it's a product that has to have a CE mark, talk to the certifying body.
The certifying body, yeah.
Right.
Now we've also got to address as well something which is becoming very much a talking point, which is called greenwashing.
Yes.
Okay. Now, many products have got questionable, unproven or unprovable claims of the impact on the environment. That is no longer going to be possible, because now you have to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
The whole concept of what we're talking about here is, first and foremost, the companies should now be looking at the products. The internet is absolutely full with, what you can do, what you should do. No one actually quite knows, because it's not been programmated yet. However, we do know which way it's going to go. So companies now should be looking at this. And especially if they are into a new design phase, they must consider this as a fundamental requirement, not as a nice to have, but as a fundamental requirement that product would be accredited to be sold in the EU. And as well, also into many other markets, because other markets are now coming to the fold. The US has its Sustainability Act. Looks very similar to this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we don't just think, well, oh, I don't sell to Europe, so it's not going to be a problem. Well, okay, I don't sell to the world's second largest market, that's fine. But okay, so I sell to America. Well, wait a minute. The same requirements are coming here as well.
This is a mega trend, right? This is why we're covering it.
Huge change, a huge change.
Yes.
Okay,
it's going to come. Yeah, in a lot of countries. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, even places like South America are looking at this. Australia, New Zealand, Brazil. Okay, and they're all as well talking about post-market surveillance as well. Now, the last time we spoke about post-market surveillance, if you remember, I was talking about medical devices.
Medical devices, yes.
Yes, you remember? And the amount of data that you have to collect to be compliant with that, it's going to be the same amount.
So,
okay.
To translate that for the listeners, that means that the company will have to keep, once the product is on the market and they're selling it, and maybe they've been selling it for 5 years, they will need to keep a log of complaints, known issues, and so on and so forth about all of the topics that Clive listed before, right? Ease of repairing, durability and reliability, end of life, what happens, can we dispose it, can we recycle it, and so on and so forth. You're going to have to keep a log of that and regularly sort of
review
do
it.
an analysis
it's got to be
of
reviewed.
that.
Yeah, it's got to be regularly reviewed. And in this case, regularly reviewed means every quarter.
Right. So here's much more work for compliance managers, compliance officers, who is going to become another part of their job. I mean, they're already collecting the technical dossier or technical folders, and the complaints from the market and things like that. This is another aspect of it. They're going to have to do the same for all of these points, but basically the impact of the product on the environment in the wider sense of the words. So they better start to look into that now. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the other aspect of this as well is the way that this is going to be empowered. The whole aspect of the green transition, okay? It's part of the European CEAP project, such as the EU Strategy for Sustainability and Circular in Textiles. So the empowerment of customers for the green transition will improve information on products at point of sale, in particular, their durability, repairability, and help prevent greenwashing and permanent obsolescence. The upcoming Commission's incentive on green claims will also complement measures in this legislation by increasing reliability, comparability, and variability of the environmental impacts of claims of products, which basically means on the label, you're going to have something which is called the unique identification number, which will be recorded by the notification bodies and given to the EU Commission. If you don't have that on that product, you will not be able to sell it in Europe.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be
that clear?
Very easy.
Very clear.
Very easy to find out, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be on the product.
On the product labeling. So if you think about textiles, your size label at the back of your neck is now going to have a QR code with it, which you can scan on your mobile telephone, which will tell you that product's EU serial number.
Yeah, plus some other information.
Plus some other things. Some of it will not be. Yeah, some of it will not be identifiable to the general public, but it would be to an inspector. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, because they will also have to. The company will also have to feed the database with some information, such as where is it made and do you have some of the certificates and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So you talked about at the design stage, okay? Now, in the actual framework here that we're looking at, it says So it says here, in addition to the life cycle analysis method, including product environmental footprint method, in addition, the objective of this legislation will be to further support by legislation on the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Act. In particular, the environmental due diligence rules that lays down for companies. Finally, the requirement also contribute to achieving EU climate goals. Now, if you remember, the EU climate goals was all about COP21, which takes it now global.
Yeah. And when you're talking about the impact on the environment, there's going to be a big focus on greenhouse gases, right? So when they talk about the impact, it's going to come back to life cycle assessments, ISO 14040 and 14064, is it?
Yes.
There are some standards that go into the details of exactly how to do that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, everybody's got their own way of doing it and their own way of spinning.
They are existing standards.
Yes.
Which they can fall back on.
Right.
Okay.
Definitely. Yes.
So you know, if you're going through the 14,000 series, it's already there. Okay. Thinking back with this, you had, for example, I keep going back to the field which I obviously work in, as you probably already know, which is medical devices and 13485. We went from the European Directive EU MDD, we went then to something which was called EU MDR, which really just strengthened the whole aspect of the control. Think about this in exactly the same way. Now, one of the requirements is that you think at your design stage the amount of energy in joules that product is going to use, how much it took to construct that product, and you're going to have that noted on your technical documentation. Now that is massive.
Yes.
How much energy does that product, how much did it take to make it? And how much energy does it take to destroy it?
Energy consumption all through the life cycle.
Yeah, all through the life cycle. So you're going to have to calculate this.
Do they actually write black and white that this is going to be required, or is it your interpretation that
it's my interpretation of reading when it's talking about energy? It's talking about energy consumption in how the product is made. I think it's Article 9. Yeah, my interpretation of reading the standard is that that's what it means. The total amount of energy that product uses, the total amount of energy that product took to build, and the total amount of energy that it took to destroy it.
Right. Wow. And it's not just about the energy, right? It's about maybe the waste that is generated all along the product life cycle.
Absolutely. It's about, think about this. When you manufacture a piece of plastic, okay, you've two things that happen here. You use a lot of energy, and there is waste products, the bits which are left over, which you normally cut away and try to go to regrind, for example. Right. So you're using energy to extract the mineral, the PP, PE, or ABS, whatever it is. Then you're using energy to mold it, but you've actually used energy to make the mold. Then the waste now, which you cannot use or cannot regrind, because in a lot of products you're not allowed a certain amount of regrind. That means that has got to be destroyed, which means it's got to be regrind. How much energy is it using to regrind that? If it's going to be destroyed, how much energy are you using to do that? And what on the raw material percentage finally is waste, or in other words, that percentage that cannot be reused.
Right.
You have to know all these things.
It's going to be a lot of documentation and a lot of Excel files, and
providing we don't use paper, then we're fine. Okay.
Right. So that I think we give a good taste to the listeners about the design side, basically all the work of the designers. Let's switch to the work of the purchasers and supply chain people, because that's going to be massive also, right?
Yes.
Because if you could make the same product just next to a hydroelectricity source where everything is, has no carbon impact or very little, you could make it with zero discharge of waste, or maybe everything is retreated very, very nicely, and the water is so pure that it's actually cleaner than the river that it goes into, and so on and so forth. Or you could make it in a place where there's no regulations, nobody cares. The source of energy is burning coal, and and the buildings themselves have to be warmed up by burning gas, and there's all kinds of things like that. So the regulation is actually trying to address that. Is it correct?
Yes, the regulation is trying to address that by actually, if the product needs the CE mark, for example, it is on that accreditation that they're looking for that information. Now, as a buyer, you have, under the regulation, as way I read this, you have a legislative duty to ensure that the product that you are buying meets the requirements as set down by this standard. And that's where the corporate due diligence comes in. So the Corporate Due Diligence Act means that if you do what you've just intimated at, you would be breaking that regulation.
So that, just to clarify to people, this is another EU regulation that is also being drafted, right? On the side, yeah. But going back to the Ecodesign regulation, as a buyer, if you don't even know how the product is made, this piece of metal.
We
don't know.
Hold on a minute. Okay, there's one thing in law which has stood the test of time, and that is that ignorance is not a defense.
Exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to take the worst case, right? What the regulation really doesn't want. The regulation really doesn't want to see people selling products into the EU and they have no clue. Oh, yeah, whatever. This is a piece of metal. It just comes out of a machine. We don't really know.
Yeah,
it's shipped from
that's
us.
right.
It's shipped from China.
This is where the product passport comes in. A buyer may be able to buy copy products and sell it on the market. Now, the EU are spending billions of euros on when this starts to happen. They've already set aside billions of dollars on a consumer advertising campaign. This is going to be driven by consumers, the empowerment of consumers to choose and to choose products which have been made in a sustainable way. And remember, that's on the label. Okay. Now, does that mean that there will be people conducting nefarious acts? Well, obviously. But, you do not have to look very far and have many companies that buy cheap products made in China, which either are not fit for purpose, break after they plug them in, or are so dangerous that they have to be removed from the market. Yeah. You do not have to look very far for that. And some companies will continue to do that. It is the consumer which is going to decide whether or not they buy that product from that company. And then legislation will come at those people because they have broken the corporate due diligence regulation.
Okay. So
that's how it's going to be. That's how it's going to be policed.
Right. Okay. So let's take an example, because we mentioned several times if there is a CE mark. But for example, textile products like garments, people go to a clothing store and buy garments. There's no CE mark on them, but this is going to be one of the first priorities, actually, the eco regulation Ecodesign Regulation is going to look into textile and set some very specific requirements.
Well,
for textile.
wait a minute. On textiles, on the back of the label, on the back of your clothes, you have washing instructions, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's where it's going.
Right. So there will be, and we discussed this a little bit last time in episode 110, there's going to be a product passport, which is probably going to be in the form of a QR code or a barcode that can be scanned, and the end customers, the end users can get a little bit of information from that. And so looking at the supply chain,
what they will get is that they will get like something similar to a serial number, which will have on it probably something like EN or CE reference number, probably a 6 or an 8-digit code. That will prove that they can type in that on their phone, and it should bring up a description of what that product is. And if it doesn't, it's a fake. It's that simple.
Right. Is it in the database of the European Commission?
It's in a European Union database.
Right. Yeah. And
which is accessible by the general public.
Right. Accessible by general public. Yeah. So I'm trying to go into the requirements for the supply chain. So these garments, the fabric, the yarn has to come from somewhere. It's got to be spun or woven or something. And then it's got to be dyed, which is extremely, which has the potential of being extremely polluting, and is and consumes a lot of energy, right? So, and then it goes into a cut and sew factory, and then it's shipped out. As a buyer, if I'm buying this, I'm the importer, and I buy this from Bangladesh, and maybe the fabric is made and dyed in China. Do I have to collect information about the supply chain? Do I just need to know where it's cut and sewn? Do I need to know where the fabric comes from and where it's dyed?
As the buyer or the importer of record, the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, this regulation will require the importer to actually have some data about these process steps.
That's right, which is exactly the same file, the technical file, which is going to be held by the importer of record,
right?
Or the EU rep, for example, shall we say? Okay, he's got to have that data, and that data must be made available.
Right. Now, that means all of the importers who do not even know where the fabric comes from, what do they have to do? And what if their supplier says, well, this is our local supplier. You understand, I cannot tell you exactly where it comes from. This is in business, there's certain things we cannot disclose, right? Okay. They're going to get a lot of responsibility.
Okay, yeah. But do you want me to tell you what the regulation and the meaning of the regulation means?
Go ahead.
Okay. If you did that, you would be breaking this law.
Yes. So the importer should say, if you want me to keep buying...
It's their due diligence requirement.
Right. I have to do it. If I cannot get this information, I have to go to another supplier?
Yes.
Or I cannot sell on the EU
I cannot
market.
sell that in Europe. Yes. It's cut and dry. It is very, very simple. It's very straightforward. If you haven't got that information, you haven't got the CE mark. If you haven't got that CE mark and you are a buyer for a large retailer and you haven't checked, or even more, that you can prove that you have checked and you still bought it, then you broke the law.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
So how far...
Take that man to cell number 19. He's going to be there for some time.
So let me ask you another example, just to make sure people grasp. So one of the questions would be, how many tiers of suppliers do I have to get down in the supply chain? So, for example, if I buy one of these little things to hold the phone up or the iPad up,
at least 3.
Wow. So based on this example, and let's just look at the metal parts. The metal parts, let's say stainless steel. It goes through, it comes out of a steel mill, right? And even before that,
it comes out of the
materials
ground.
come from some mine somewhere, and they use whatever to power to power the furnaces and make it very, very hot, right? Then it goes into some wholesalers or distributors, then die casting place, and then it goes to another place maybe for electroplating, and then it goes into another place maybe that assembles the little rubber feet on it and does the packing and ships it out. If I'm the buyer and I buy a batch of 1,000 or 5,000 pieces of this little iPhone holder,
there's no number on the regulation.
Right. If my supplier who puts the little rubber feet and puts the packaging together says, we buy it from our suppliers, sorry, now if they tell you, okay, this is the die casting place,
then you can go to the die casting place and ask them where they got their materials from.
Yes. Wow.
Think about this in a logical sense, okay? We're talking about a piece of metal, okay? It come out of the hole in the ground somewhere, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was the environmental impact of that hole in the ground? Did you knock down all the forests in the Amazon to make that piece of metal for me?
And,
okay.
Yeah. What kind of engines? What kind of extraction equipment?
That's right.
How was it shaped?
Yeah.
Yes.
If that piece of metal, what we're talking about here, although it's not rose, but my interpretation would be is that the actual material value of that component within any subassembly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the little bit of plastic which goes on the bottom of it, well, okay, we're not really going to be too much interested in that, but you should know. But the big piece of metal which is actually driving this, yeah, we do want to know what that's doing.
Right. So there are priorities. What you're saying is that people should, of course, put a higher priority on the materials that make up most of the bill of material.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And
also the materials that are known to come with a heavy environmental bill.
That is entirely what it says here.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Right. That makes sense. So it's all about visibility on the bill of materials, visibility down the supply chain, not just at the assembly.
Traceability and visibility. Traceability and
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they mentioned traceability a number of times. Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and they also, as well, when it comes to country level, they also is wrote into the WTO notification as well. By the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the main problem in this initiative, for what I see it, is that it seeks to remedy a very large problem and a very almost unmanageable situation where the world has got itself into now. Now, the first time when you read this, I actually first of all read within an EU document here, COVID-19 and the things which that has highlighted in the supply chain. Now, the policy objections are identified in sections 2 and 5.2 of the impact assessment. They've already done the assessment impact studies, and they have found them to be in line with the general requirements laid down by COPS 21. Now, it also noted that due to the adoption of the Commission's proposal for the Directive on Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence during the preparation of this initiative, it was deemed appropriate to exclude requirements on social aspects from the scope of this legislative provision as a specific in the legal text, and an evaluation will take place after 8 years from the date of the application of this legislation. Among other aspects, this evolution will consider inclusion of social requirements in a regulatory framework. Now, anybody that's not used to reading EU regulations, what that means, they're saying that this is going to be enforced for at least 8 years.
After the product has been put on the market, you mean? They have to be able to come and check it up.
Yes.
And one thing that you mentioned is that this is going to be intertwined to a certain degree with social compliance requirements. So we're talking about eco-design, but actually the impact on the environment sort of always includes safety for the users.
It does mention health and safety, but it mentions health and safety in a more general term as regards a general population's health and safety. So what we're talking about here is pollutants and toxins.
Right. And we just mentioned this social compliance, at the manufacturing sites and beyond. Yes. So this is again a mega trend. This is why we're covering it in several episodes. Of importers are going to be forced to have more visibility into their supply chain, to have more traceability, to be able to actually check if this really comes from there, and the batch that I get really comes from that supplier, and so on and so forth. More and more requirements are going to be added to that. Obviously, over time, the requirements will be clarified, but we already know enough to know, okay, what are the key data to pull out and to document and to keep for the future. This is already clear.
This is very clear already.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as I said to you before, I'm already writing letters on behalf of companies into their supply chain, where to seek basic information on the amount of energy used to make a product, the amount of waste that product generates, the amount of toxicity, the carbon footprint, all of this data, collect it now, right now.
Yes.
Don't wait, okay? Because, and if the suppliers say we're not going to give you that, start looking for new suppliers. I cannot be any clearer than that.
Right.
Okay.
I'll make it very clear. This is a deal breaker, right? If we don't have this data, we're going to get in trouble. Yes.
Well, I mean, look, buyers historically, and the past 3 years have really just highlighted this to many of the legislators. We cannot leave the policing of a product or an industry down to the buyers. This has become abundantly clear. Okay,
there's always bad actors who will sell cheaper, and of course. Yeah,
and as far as the EU is concerned, they've said clearly enough is enough. You saw this with MDR. You've seen this now with this, and before we scared everybody to death, it's not yet been programmated, but I would not bet that it doesn't get programmated. There is too much data. There is too much information of what it means for it not to happen. We already know. Now, okay, I've just found the paragraph when we talked about earlier. The regulatory fitness and simplification. Though SMEs suggested a certain negative impact may stem from some of the measures under the preferred combination of the policy options identified in the impact assessment, many also express a belief that these can be offset and bring added value over time.
Yeah, because they know everybody's going to be up in arms and saying, are you kidding? But I cannot do that. This is only for very big companies.
Let me just finish this. In addition, the Commission has looked specifically at ways to mitigate negative impacts on SMEs. And these are detailed in Annex 19 of the standard proposal, if you want to look for it. For consultation purposes and in connection with specific examples of existing consultation forums under the EU Ecodesign Directive, proposal establishes that eco-design forums shall not have a negative impact on small to medium-sized enterprises, the craft industry, trade unions, trades, retailers, importers, environmental protection groups, and consumer organizations. So reading that, everybody has been considered.
Yeah, they've talked to everybody, right? This has been
talked to everybody.
Years in the making. There's been a group working on that for some time. They've consulted with everybody.
Yeah. The commission set up the regulation with the members group on the 13th of April 2016. This is how long this has been in the planning. So, like I say, it's not going away.
Yeah, but the people that they have not consulted is the coffee making ODM manufacturer in Ningbo, who is going to say, sorry, I don't tell you where the plastic parts come from. I don't tell you where the filters come from. I don't tell you all this. This is my product. These guys have not been consulted, and the EU Commission could not care less about these people.
Exactly, but it actually does refer back to the agreements as China, if we want to talk about China, signed up for when it's in its acquisition to the WTO.
Yeah,
done that.
Yeah, and one thing we should add before we close this episode is that this commission is very strong-headed, and when they go in a direction, it's very unlikely they turn in another direction as soon as people start to protest. I think this is abundantly clear with what they have mandated about cars. 2035 internal combustion engines forbidden for sale in EU.
Yeah, will be a thing of the past. Yeah.
And most of the car makers are protesting, and they are, very big constituents. They pay a lot of taxes, and they employ a lot of people, and they and so on and so forth. And they're protesting, and the commission still goes through with it. Medical device regulation, as we talked before,
absolutely.
A number of notified bodies have said our clients are not ready. It's not possible.
And they turn around and say, get them ready.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what have they been waiting for? This thing has been published 5 years ago. What are they waiting for, right? So this should be a warning to people who are thinking, well, this eco-design thing, eco-design regulation, yeah, right. It's going to be a text somewhere. Nobody's going to really care about that. Well, be very careful, because as we mentioned, especially in episode 110, it's going to be much easier for market surveillance authorities and also customs and different parties to check if a batch complies or does not comply. It's going to be much easier.
What we should say is that this idea of a product passport is very much like your visa to go into a country.
Right. Yeah, passport. I mean,
think about it.
That's a good. They picked that name carefully. Does it have the passport? Is the right passport? Is got the visa? Come in.
Yeah.
We look at the passport. There's no visa. You cannot come in. Yeah.
Yeah. That's about as clear as what we could make it for the listener.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great point. All right. Well, we're kind of running out of time, so I think we'll get back to this when new details come out, and maybe when we get some real case studies and so on about companies that are doing certain things. So let's stay tuned. We'll keep covering this aspect of thing, and also, as Clive mentioned, other countries are working on something similar and going in the same direction. So we'll try to provide updates on that. Well, thanks a lot, Clive. It's always
great. Nice to be with you again.
Yeah, great. And thanks for everybody for listening. And you will hear from us next week as usual. Thanks a lot.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast, brought to you by the Sophie's Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.